Welcome to the show, good friend of the show, Dr. Anna Brooks. Anna, good afternoon, /evening to you.
Good evening, afternoon to you too.
You doing well? How's your day going?
Not too bad. Down here in Wellington after a COVID-free flight, COVID-free city. It's quite good being COVID-free.
So how were the masks on the flights, the people around you?
Non-existent.
Oh, really? Not a one?
No, there was a one or two. Like it was that bad. Yeah, like surprisingly bad. I sort of thought, it would be sort of peeling back, but it was fairly mask free. I was trying to gauge whether I sort of thought it was 95% mask free, 98%, 99%. So yeah, we really are in a moved on society, I think.
I saw an email from a school in the last couple of days, and it was very casual and very light-hearted. It wasn't making a joke, but it was said in a less serious way. Oh, we've got a bit of a COVID cluster at the moment. And I'm like, isn't that weird? Sort of a week out from when all these restrictions were less, that there's a bit of a COVID cluster all of a sudden in a school.
Yeah.
So, yes, it's weird. It's strange. But listen, the reason I contacted you today, and thank you for giving us a few minutes during your conference time, is I saw I don't know if it's interesting, but certainly on New Zealand Herald this morning, they do like a short series of adverts, and news stories. They tell a news story and they do a news bulletin in like 5 minutes. And they were talking about long COVID, and I thought, I know someone who knows a bit about long COVID. So I watched it and I went, this sounds a bit familiar to me. So I thought, I'll get Anna, see what you've got to say about it, because it sounds like the government's saying, gosh, who knew this long COVID thing? Who knew? No one's talked to us about this. So let me play the story first, and then I'd like to get your take on it.
And there's no way of saying quite how much the aftermath of COVID is hurting New Zealand's economy. A report by the Australian government estimates around 31,000 people are calling in sick to work each day because of long COVID symptoms. It shows Australia lost 3 million working days in the first 6 months of 2022 to illness. Finance Minister Robertson says New Zealand doesn't have this depth of analysis, but the Health Ministry is looking into long COVID research.
Like everyone in the world, we'll be continuing to track this. It's obviously a very new situation, and I don't even think there's a diagnostic tool per se for it at the moment. And so therefore, for people who are experiencing it, it'll be, potentially challenging.
And those are the latest New Zealand.
So there you go. So what I read from that is that, there we go, is that Australia has been tracking long COVID. They've lost 3 million work days in the first 6 months of this year. 31,000 people, I think it said a day or a week, are phoning in with being sick. And the New Zealand government, via the finance minister, says we don't have the depth of analysis that Australia had. So in other words, they're saying, as far as I can see it, we can't comment on that because we don't know, because we haven't been doing the research like Australia has. And that's when I went, I know someone who's been doing some research around long COVID, Dr. Anna Brooks. So tell us what you're hearing, and tell us what we're missing, and tell us what the government has or hasn't done in the situation.
Well, yeah, a few things came through there, like that constant phrase of it's all very new, we don't know much yet. It gets a bit tiresome to keep hearing. What is new? We've known since 2020 that long COVID was always going to be a problem. And it has been a problem here in New Zealand since 2020. So it is not something new. It is something that has been actively dismissed for a very long time. So that was the first thing. And then absolutely true, there is no diagnostic tools. Guess what my research is trying to uncover? A diagnostic tool.
All right.
That's exactly the focus of my research, is to unpack and understand, what is happening in the dysregulated immune system, essentially. Can we find a diagnostic marker so that we can help validate people who are going through this and all the rest of it? But guess what? Literally $0 has been invested in this country in biomedical long COVID research. Now, that's another massive emphasis that I want to get across here. Yes, the government have now invested, they released money, I think it was 9 million across, I think it was 23 projects that were variations on understanding the vaccine uptake and the COVID response. And all of these things are all very critical, you know, not dismissing any of those aspects, but not one single project is dedicated to the biomedical understanding of this illness. So there's going to be projects that will uncover prevalence. All of these things are really, really necessary. So as I say, everything that was funded is, you know, is necessary, but not one of those projects is biomedical research. And another aspect of that, it's not traditional for biomedical research to come out of a ministry, but, you know, like the numbers that are floating around internationally for biomedical research in the space are huge. You know, it was over $1 billion in the US and, you know, several millions in the UK. And we've had $0 in the biomedical research space to understand what's going on with long COVID.
So what I hear you saying, and from what Grant Robertson was saying there, I jotted down 3 lines, and one of the lines was, it's a new situation. You've already referenced that because it's not a new situation.
No.
Another line I jotted down was potentially challenging. Like it might be, it might not be, you know, we'll see. And the third thing was the no diagnostic tools. What I hear you saying is you've been working on what could be a diagnostic tool, but the government hasn't really addressed or given funding or helped go through that process. So now they're at a point where they've gone, well, there's no but there could have been a diagnostic tool if someone within the structure of the bureaucracy had have decided to drive some money into the area you're working in. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's sort of a fair analysis of that, because, you know, like research by nature, you know, we have to explore, you know, avenues to be able to come up with a diagnostic tool. And there's been a ton of research, like, you know, the amount of research publications already on long COVID is phenomenal. And so again, it comes back to sort of calling this a new situation. It's not a new situation at all. You know, there's a ton of research that's coming through, but it's also always evolving as well. And the other thing that can be somewhat frustrating is sort of saying, oh, we've got to bring it back to the New Zealand situation because, you know, Omicron is new and we were all vaccinated. It's like, well, again, we're already hearing internationally that, you know, the biggest wave of long COVID is going to be from the Omicron. You know, our support networks exploded with people with long COVID. We already know this is happening here. And so yeah, some of these things become frustrating to continually hear that it's new, it's going to be a big problem, because we knew this all along. And so, yes, it is also tough when you sort of are immersed in the research, well connected internationally about hearing what could be strong leads to, you know, to develop diagnostics and things like that, and just not having resourcing to do so. Because, and, you know, in research, everything takes a long time, but do we have time? Do we want to be waiting? You know, when you look at the international groups of the millions of people suffering with this condition, we don't have time. This is it, you know, and referring to Australia talking about lost work days and all the rest of it. You know, even getting infected and not getting long COVID, the lost productivity is huge just in that alone. And then that's not to mention all of those people that are sort of saying, you know what, I can't go back to work. I cannot function in this post-COVID state. And some of those people might have a long COVID type state for 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, a year, forever. That we don't know how many are going to go on to permanently not recover. And all we're sort of, the plea here is to escalate the demand in this space to get answers. We absolutely know that there are, you know, it's an organic biomedical or biological condition, and we need to sink resources into it so we can escalate and fast track diagnostic tests and treatments. And, you know, and we know that around the world that this is underway, and that's no excuse to sort of sit back and wait, if you like, when we could be helping New Zealanders here.
I just did some numbers while you were talking, and I did them based on a minimum wage type salary, which obviously not those 3 million lost days in Australia are not all minimum wage. But even if it was, that means the Australian economy has lost $500 million from people being off. So it doesn't seem to be a very long bow to go investing money into it, you know, to try and help that not be the situation. it's not very difficult to figure out how that can have a literal financial, let alone health payback as well. I was going to say, Anna, it's a kind of weird question to ask you, but would you be considered the foremost expert in long COVID research in New Zealand, or one of the foremost experts? Because it seems to be your area of research. Are other people quite delving into this as specifically as you are?
I don't know many others that are specifically diving into the biomedical side. We've got large networks of scientists, interested in understanding the impacts of long COVID, in a multidisciplinary way. But no, that we don't really have. I don't know of anyone else diving into the biomedical side. No, yeah.
Because obviously, if you are indeed the foremost expert in New Zealand, or if no one else is going into the biomedical side, and that's where you need to go to find diagnostic tools, I'm wondering, of course, has the government talked to you? Have they reached out? Are they asking New Zealand's foremost expert what they should be doing to find this diagnostic tool? Have you had any interactions with them at all?
Not in that regard, no. I guess the first step that has progressed is, as I say, funding some of these projects that are going to understand the scale. So, documenting how many people have this condition. But I guess another analogy, or another comparison is the warp speed that a vaccine was generated. And I think that's what a lot of people are saying in this space, is that sure, we all stops were pulled out, to make sure that we got a vaccine as fast as possible. In fact, I lectured on it yesterday, and it was a matter of days. It was days before, the vaccine project kicked off, from days since the sequence of the virus was made public. It was like, right, let's create a vaccine. And there's just been no urgency to say, right, let's see what long COVID is, and let's stop this thing from happening. And when you were talking about investments, when we sort of try and document how much this is costing economies and things, we can't also forget that we're going to continually get long COVID, because we have now got no protections in place, and the virus is going to continue to circulate. And we know that you might get one infection and be fine. You might get another one and be fine. It might be your third one that you get long COVID, or it might be your fifth infection that you get long COVID. The point is for as long as this virus is circulating, we will continue to get an increased burden of long COVID. So, if we're going to accept that, because our government has accepted that and has told us that that's what we need to live with, if that is the case, then we need to be following up behind with tools to help people when they suddenly come down with this illness and cannot return to their work, their life, function as they once did.
The finance minister, acting prime minister, telling us that we don't have the diagnostic tools to look at this, obviously referencing that Australia does. What do we need to do now? Are you saying they don't? Australia doesn't?
No, nobody has a diagnostic tool. What I think what he was referencing there was probably saying that I don't actually know what their systems are over there, like whether there is state by state or a nationwide ability to track long COVID. I haven't seen any mention of that, but obviously they've done some numbers there, and probably that sounded like that came from sick days, right? So people who were saying, hey, I'm off with COVID. So I don't know if that's that they're just surmising how many people have got long COVID, but there's certainly no diagnostic tools. What the way that you get diagnosed is what we call a clinical diagnosis. It's the same thing with ME/CFS, the other post-viral illness that many New Zealanders are already suffering with. These illnesses, because there's not a diagnostic test, you can't go and get a blood test and say, yes, you're suffering with this illness. What has to happen with ME/CFS is you have to be suffering for 6 months and have every other illness ruled out, and then that's when you're declared that you have this illness. With long COVID, it's the official diagnosis can be from 3 months. So what has changed in recent times is that your GP can now diagnose you with long COVID because there is a coding system. And whether or not that's been successful, we don't necessarily have much feedback on it it's been a mixed response in our support groups, whether people are managing to get that diagnosis or not. But essentially the tools are in place now to go to your GP and walk through your symptoms and, and in some cases the epidemiology of your illness, because not everyone has validation that they were infected. All of those things, make it cloudy, but there is absolutely no diagnostic test. And worse than that, your tests come back normal. So you could be so critically ill, and it's mind-blowing that every single test you could run comes back normal. And so that is what we really need to work on, and that's what we're sort of trying to educate and make sure that the doctor's response is not, therefore there's nothing wrong. So our catchphrase is, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. It's just that we don't have the tools. We need to find the tools, and we need to do that quickly. So that's kind of where the space is. And we know that vascular damage is part of the picture. We know that a disrupted immune system is part of the picture. We just need to develop the tests that might pick this up. We're also, one of the places that we're sort of heading down the road of is the fact that we wander around taking for granted that our immune system is constantly keeping our latent viruses that we all live with, that we don't even give a second thought to. We all get Epstein-Barr virus, we get glandular fever in our teens. All of those things live in us permanently, nice, suppressed away, not causing any problems mostly. And one of the hypotheses behind long COVID is that maybe the SARS-CoV-2 infection wakes these viruses back up, and that's what's triggering a long-term illness. We know that there are links to this Epstein-Barr virus, or EBV, or the one that causes glandular fever. We know that there are links to ME/CFS, so chronic fatigue syndrome. We know that virus has been linked to that illness. So we're seeing some patterns emerging, but it's just incredibly difficult to get any traction because biomedical research is expensive, and we need resourcing to do this. And as I say, a ton of resourcing went into vaccine development, and it would just be wonderful if the same urgency was placed on preventing these potentially long-term illness for a lot of people.
Have you experienced as an academic, I'm going to use a weird word here, Anna, but kind of the lab work thinking about we'll give you your answer in a year isn't as sexy as the virus, which we'll get into now and save some lives. Is there anything to do with prioritizing what they think is more important today versus what I hear you saying about is going to be more important in the long run?
I think we can't hide behind the fact that on an international scale, the pandemic is now politicized. We can't deny that, right? So any government of any day, around the world doesn't want a burden of what's going to come, next term in a few years' time. So yeah, I think when you strip it back, it's not surprising that there's not a huge focus on the potential long-term harms of infections. But that doesn't mean that's a good thing, does it? It just means I think from my perspective, I just accept that that's politics. I think is all I can say to that.
Finally, as well, does that just mean now that we've got some things in place with GPs that what the finance minister was describing as an in-depth analysis, that now just comes with time? Like now that the things are in place, it's going to take 6 months to get that data to be able to reference back to, and that's really all we got to do now is wait until the data rolls in.
Yeah, so and as I say, some of these projects that are funded will basically help reveal how many New Zealanders are impacted by this illness. But what I would argue is that we should be doing them concurrently, because everyone that reaches out to me with this illness, they don't just want to be a number on a page. They don't want to be just a diagnosis. They want to understand what's happening and try and get diagnosed, but also, try and get better. And we can't, it's really, really tough fielding emails constantly where people are saying, and they'll list off, a barrage of very debilitating symptoms, and there's not much we can say back. And that's really, really rough. And so that's why, sometimes it's tough as an academic where sometimes people sort of assume it's your job, or, you know, like some people might sort of say, oh, you know, it's tough if you haven't got funding, you know, like as if it's my loss, if you like. And it's kind of like, this isn't about me and saying, oh, great, you know, I'm leading a study. This is so not about that. And that's what's quite difficult to get across sometimes, that it's as if you feel like you're filling your own bank account trying to get money, when really what I'm trying to facilitate is the massive demand from sick people who want answers. And that sometimes is hard to communicate, because it often feels like you're trying to win your own lottery, like that people think you're trying to win your own lottery, and you're like, no, this is not about me wanting to do, you know, this isn't an excitement of research. This is, I want to facilitate people getting better.
Dr. Anna Brooks, Auckland University. Anna, thanks for joining us again today. We always appreciate you having you on. You're giving us some minutes now and then to share this out there. If you could say one thing to the Prime Minister right now about, you know, what you need to see to help you get there, what would it be?
I would love to see more investment in the biomedical understanding of post-viral illnesses. Now.
Done. Just like
now.
That. Anna, thanks for your time. Appreciate you.
No problem. Catch you later.